The light in the casting room was the color of old bone. Mara Voss had been under fluorescence her whole career. Newsrooms, hospitals, the inside of a forward operating base in the Karst Highlands. But this light was different. It didn't illuminate so much as it catalogued. She felt it moving over her skin like a slow tide, pausing at her eyes. "You have remarkable ocular pigmentation," said the thing behind the desk. It wore a human shape the way a coat rack wears a coat. The dimensions correct, the weight distribution all wrong. Hazel. We find Hazel particularly expressive. "Thanks," Mara said, and kept her hands loose in her lap. The facility called itself the Gail Mainwaring Institute for Visual Arts. It had appeared in the classified sections of 17 cities simultaneously, 6 weeks ago, hunting for models, photographers, visual talent of any background. The pay was obscene. The references were fabricated, but fabricated well. The kind of fabrication that required knowing what humans considered legitimate. Mara had flagged it in her 3rd week covering the disappearances. She'd walked herself in on the 4th. Her handler at the bureau thought she was on a 2-week leave in Lisbon. The thing behind the desk, she'd been calling it Corday in her head, after the nameplate, smiled with the lower half of its face. The upper half didn't participate. "We'll begin the first session this afternoon. Standard intake as we discussed. The photography suite on the 4th floor." "Of course," Mara said, and smiled back with all of her face. She had counted 7 others in the waiting area outside. A cave surveyor from Manitoba, still wearing chalk dust on his forearms. A construction foreman from Osaka with a hard hat ring pressed into his hair. A foundry operator from Szeged who smelled of iron. An archaeologist whose field jacket had been hastily exchanged for a blazer, the lining still tagged. A mountaineer, a fashion photographer, a retired ophthalmologist, who kept touching the frames of his glasses, as though reassuring himself they were there. None of them were here by coincidence. They had all been specifically selected. Mara had spent 3 weeks figuring out what they had in common and had come up with nothing. Different industries, different continents, different ages. Whatever the Gail Mainwaring Institute found valuable in them, it wasn't professional background. She thought about it while the elevator rose. The light in the elevator was the same bone white, the same slow cataloging quality. She turned her face away and watched the floor numbers change. The photography suite was enormous. Banks of equipment she didn't recognize lined the walls. She'd been a war correspondent and an investigative journalist, and she knew her way around a surveillance installation, and this was nothing like one. The devices were oriented inward, all facing a raised circular platform in the center of the room. The platform had a shallow depression in its center, roughly the diameter of a human torso. She filed that away and kept her expression open, curious, professionally impressed. "If you'd stand on the mark," said the technician. Another one wearing a human shape. This one was better at it, the proportions finer, the uncanny valley shallower, but Mara had learned in the last 3 weeks to watch the eyes. Human eyes moved in small, unconscious corrections, microsaccades, the constant, imperceptible tremor of organic tissue. The eyes of the things from the Institute were too steady. They moved only when moved deliberately, like the eyes of a painting. She stood on the mark. The first pulse hit her behind the sternum, a vibration more felt than heard. The second was behind her eyes. Not painful, more like the pressure change in a descending aircraft, a sense of something trying to equalize. The devices on the walls were cycling, their housings rotating in increments. She understood then what they were doing. She'd read the files from the 3 recovered subjects. Out of 31 missing, only 3 recovered. All of them altered in ways the Bureau's medical team had struggled to categorize. The phrase the team lead had used was selective neurological extraction. What the Gail Mainwaring Institute was doing, in its photography suite on the 4th floor, was not taking pictures. It was taking sight. Not the physical apparatus. The eye itself would remain, functioning, intact. What they extracted was something upstream of that, the capacity to interpret, to impose meaning on light, to see a human face and recognize grief in it, or love, or the specific exhaustion of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time. The recovered subjects could detect motion, color, shape. They could not recognize anything. They moved through the world in a state of permanent visual static. Pattern without meaning, signal without language. And whatever the Institute extracted, it used. Mara had a theory about that too. The things from the Institute, She'd been calling them the Veth, using the word their own internal documents used. The only word she'd recovered from the 7 terabytes of encrypted files she'd pulled off the Institute's external server before walking through the front door. The Veth perceived the universe differently than humans did. Not better or worse, differently. And what human beings had, what 700 million years of eyes evolving in the chaos of a living world had produced, was something the Veth could not generate themselves. They could see, but they could not interpret. They could not read the world's face. So they were harvesting the ability to do so, carefully, selectively, from humans who, for reasons she still didn't fully understand, had stronger than average interpretive capacity. The pulse behind her eyes intensified. She felt her vision beginning to shimmer was the only word for it. The room didn't change, but the room became less fixed. The equipment on the walls bleeding at the edges. The Veth technician's shape flickering at the periphery. Mara reached into her jacket pocket. The Bureau had given her 3 things when she'd made the case for going in herself: a tracking device, a distress beacon, and a vial of something their xenochemist had developed after exhaustive study of the 3 recovered subjects. The vial was the size of a lipstick tube. Its contents were a deep amber, slightly viscous, and what it contained was a concentrated reduction of the interpretive signal. The thing the Veth wanted. Compressed and chemically stabilized, ready to be released as an aerosol. She had argued with the xenochemist for an hour about whether the effect would work at this concentration, in an enclosed space, on a species whose sensory architecture she didn't fully understand. He had said he thought so. She had asked what thought so meant in hard percentages. He had said 60-40. She had taken the vial. She thumbed the cap off and held it at her side. The shimmer behind her eyes was becoming something else. Not pain exactly, but a pulling sensation, as though something had taken hold of the connective tissue between sensation and meaning and was slowly drawing them apart. She thought of the cave surveyor in the waiting room, the iron smell of the foundry foreman. She thought of them standing on this same mark, one by one. She thought of them afterward. She brought the vial up and broke the seal. The aerosol dispersed in a radius of roughly 3 meters, odorless to her. To the Veth technician, it was apparently something else entirely. The creature's carefully maintained human shape collapsed, like a building losing its load-bearing wall, the bones of the pretended face rearranging. The eyes going wide and then going wrong, cycling through focal lengths that didn't correspond to anything in the room. It made a sound she had no framework for. It reached for the wall and missed badly, its hand landing a full foot from where the wall was. Blind, she had thought, interpretively blind. 60-40. She moved. The stairwell was where the floor plan said it was. She took the stairs down 2 at a time and hit the 2nd floor at a dead run, already running the math. 7 others in the waiting area. Corday at the desk on the 1st floor. At minimum 4 more technicians she'd counted on her way up. The facility had 3 floors below ground. Encrypted files had suggested laboratory space down there. Something the documents called the rendering chambers. And an unknown number of Veth that had never come up to the floors that interfaced with humans at all. She needed the foundry foreman. She'd decided that before she walked in the building. His name was Thomas Fekete. She'd run his background twice. 31 years at the Diosgyr Steelworks. He would know what she needed to know. The waiting area was already wrong when she reached it. Corday was standing, no longer pretending. Its shape expanded to something larger and more geometric than a human body. The walls of the reception area sheened with a faint bioluminescence she hadn't seen before, the Veth equivalent of alarm. The 7 potential subjects were on their feet, confused, the archaeologist already backing toward the door. "Go," Mara said, not breaking stride, and pointed at the exterior exit. "All of you now. Don't stop. Don't look back. Get 3 blocks and call emergency services." She said it the way she'd learned to say things in the field. Flat, certain, carrying the specific frequency of someone who has already decided and is not interested in discussion. 6 of them went. They went fast. Thomas Fekete didn't move. He was a big man, late 50s, with the specific stillness of someone who has spent decades working near things that will kill you if you flinch. He looked at Mara, and then at what Corday had become, and his expression was that of a man running rapid structural calculations. "You need something," he said. "Your basement," she said. "What do they have down there?" "I don't know what they have, But I know this building has a heating system that vents through the lower floors. He paused. Saw the pipes when they walked me in. Industrial scale. Mara looked at him for exactly 1 second. Can you push the temperature in an enclosed space past the tolerance of biological tissue? Depends on the tissue. Assume it's similar to ours. Then yes, he said. Given the right equipment and the right confined space, yes. Corday moved. It moved the way the Veth moved when they stopped performing humanity. Efficiently, without the wasted motion of biological ballast, closing the distance between them in a way that made the room seem to have shortened. Mara was already moving laterally, creating angle, buying time the way she'd learned to buy it in the Karst Highlands, when the geometry of a bad situation was still workable if you didn't stop moving. Ficate picked up the waiting room's steel-framed bench. It weighed, she estimated, 40 kilograms, and held it between himself and Corday with the casual steadiness of a man for whom 40 kilograms is not a conversation. She found the basement stairs. The rendering chambers were worse than the files had suggested. 3 rooms. In the first, equipment she recognized from the photography suite upstairs, scaled up considerably, arranged around a central space, large enough to process multiple subjects simultaneously. In the second, storage, rows of crystalline cylinders, each one containing something that moved at the edge of perception, a shimmer that resolved, when she held her hand up, into a faint coherent image, a man walking a dog, a woman reading at a window, the ordinary incomprehensible beauty of interpreted experience, bottled and catalogued and waiting for export to somewhere she would never be able to imagine. In the third room, the heating infrastructure. Thomas Fekete arrived 90 seconds behind her, breathing hard, with a cut above his eye that he wasn't paying attention to. He looked at the equipment the way he had looked at Corday, as a structural problem, tractable, solvable by a man who understood heat transfer and the behavior of materials under load. Give me 4 minutes, he said. You have 2. Then stand there and don't touch anything. She stood there. She could hear movement on the floor above. Multiple Veth, no longer bothering with human acoustics, communicating in subsonic registers that she felt in her back teeth. The building's bioluminescence had intensified. She thought about the crystalline cylinders in the second room, the shimmer of extracted experience inside them, and felt something she hadn't felt since the Karst Highlands. A very specific kind of anger. Not hot, cold, the kind that doesn't impair judgment, the kind that sharpens it. Ficate worked with the economy of long practice, rerouting, bypassing, persuading the facility's industrial heating system to do something it had not been designed to do. She watched his hands and thought, this is what 4 million years looks like. This is what you get when you evolve in chaos, under predation, in a world that is constantly trying to kill you. You get hands that know how to make fire do what you need it to do. You get a brain that looks at a problem it has never seen and finds the load-bearing wall. How many of these things are in the building, he said, not looking up. At least a dozen, possibly more below ground, and the ones upstairs. We'll feel this first. The lower floors absorb heat from above. He glanced at her. She said, I've been in buildings when they go bad. He nodded. He finished what he was doing. He looked at the configuration he'd created, checked it once, checked it twice. She recognized that habit, the double verification of a man who has learned that a second check is the difference between coming home and not coming home. And then straightened. Back stairwell, he said. Northeast corner. I noted it on the way in. I know where it is, they went. The second floor was already becoming unknowable. She could feel it before she saw it, the air quality changing. The particular dense warmth of a space that is accumulating heat faster than it can dissipate. The Veth on this floor were no longer maintaining coherent shapes. She glimpsed them in the corridor, and the corridor seemed to contain something geometrically larger than the space available. The Veth's true dimensions pressing against the architecture the way water presses against a weakening dam. They moved toward the humans and then stopped, recalibrated, their motion becoming uncertain. Not blind, but impaired. The temperature differential was doing enough to their ability to track, to predict trajectory, to do whatever the Veth equivalent of reading a room was. She had suspected this from the files. The Veth's interpretive machinery operated in a narrow range of thermal conditions. Push outside that range, and their perception degraded. They were creatures of controlled environments. Harvesting ability they did not have from beings who had evolved without any controlled environment at all. She felt in the stairwell something almost like satisfaction. The ground floor was clear. The building's exterior looked, from the street, entirely normal. The Gale Mainwaring Institute for Visual Arts. Its window displays unchanged, its signage professional and unremarkable. 3 blocks away she could see the flicker of emergency response lights. The 6 others had made it out. Someone had believed them enough to call it in fast. Fichete stood beside her on the sidewalk, coat slightly singed at the collar, blood drying above his eye, watching the building with the expression of a man who has done the calculation and found it satisfactory. What were they after, he said. She considered how to explain it. They wanted to know what we see, she said finally. Not the light, what we do with it. He was quiet for a moment. And the cylinders downstairs. Evidence, she said. We need what's in them. When the building's cool enough to re-enter. The people they took it from. Some of them we can find. The neurological extraction isn't permanent if we get to it quickly enough. She paused. For some of them, it won't be quick enough. He absorbed that. She watched him absorb it, watched the grief move through him, the immediate functional acceptance of it. The way a man who has worked near furnaces absorbs bad news. You acknowledge the heat, and you don't let it stop you from doing the job. Where do you need me? He said. She looked at him for a moment. 31 years at the Dioscure Steelworks. Seen the pipes when they walked him in, picked up a 40-kilogram bench between herself and an alien predator without being asked. There are 11 other facilities, she said. Same model, different cities. We've been tracking them for 3 weeks, but we need people who can walk in and function. People they'd want, he said. People who have something they can't manufacture. Yes. He thought about it for the length of time it took 2 emergency vehicles to round the corner at the end of the block. Then he nodded. The same double verification gesture, the same economy. All right, he said. The first responders came fast. The way first responders come when someone has called in something credible about a building full of things that aren't human. Mara had made sure of that. Left the evidence trail clean enough to follow, but not so clean that it looked constructed. She had been doing this for 3 weeks, and she had learned the topography of it. Where to the groundwork, and where to step back and let human institutions do what they were designed to do. She gave her ID to the first officer who reached her. Real ID this time. The Bureau could clean up the Lisbon story. There are survivors in the building, she said. Possibly more than we know. You need hazmat and you need a xenobiologist. And I need you to call this number in the next 4 minutes. She gave him the number. Tell them, Voss. Tell them the rendering chambers are intact. He looked at her. He looked at the building. He made the call. Thomas Fekete stood a few feet away, watching the upper floors of the building, and his face in profile was the face of a man who has looked at a structure and seen what it is made of. The light from the emergency vehicles moved across it, red and blue, alternating, the specific human language of alarm, of I am here, of something has happened and we are responding. The building's windows had begun to glow from inside. Not the bone-white catalog light of the Veth installation. Something warmer. Something the color of iron at working temperature, at the precise degree where it becomes possible to shape. She had thought, when she took the vial, that 60-40 was acceptable odds. She believed that more firmly now. The Veth had spent an unknown number of years targeting humans who were particularly good at reading the world's face. Surveyors who could feel the shape of unseen caverns, foundry workers who knew by the color of the heat exactly what the metal was doing, archaeologists who could run their hands over old stone and tell you what it meant. They had believed this made those humans vulnerable, targetable, worth harvesting. They had been wrong about what it made them. Inside the building, something finally gave way, a deep concussive shift, felt in the chest rather than heard. And the bioluminescence in the upper windows flickered and went dark, and Mara thought of 31 people and what had been taken from them, and what she was going to spend the rest of however long she had giving back. She took out her phone and called her bureau handler. He answered on the first ring. He said, Lisbon. Lisbon was a cover story, she said. I need you to listen. A pause. Then I'm listening, she told him. She told him everything. Standing on the sidewalk outside the Gale Mainwaring Institute for Visual Arts with the first responders moving past her, and the building heat dark behind her, and Tamas Fekete at her shoulder, watching the street with the steadiness of a man who knows what heat can do when you persuade it correctly. When she finished, there was a silence that had weight to it. Then her handler said quietly, 11 more facilities. Yes. And you have a team. She looked at Fiquet. She thought of the archaeologist's field jacket, the mountaineer's calloused hands, the cave surveyor's chalk-dusted forearms. She thought of the ophthalmologist touching his glasses frames, that small anchoring gesture, the very human need to confirm that the things you use to see the world are still where you left them. Working on it, she said. The heat from the building reached her across the distance between them, not unpleasant, more like the warmth from a fireplace. The oldest technology, the first negotiation between humans and the forces that wanted to consume them, redirected, made useful, made theirs. She pocketed the phone. 11 facilities. Unknown numbers of Veth. 31 people who needed what had been taken from them returned. A world full of human beings who had been targeted because they had learned, over uncountable generations, to read the face of things. She started walking.